What's up guys, Connor here. Today we're talking about one of the first steps in our process, which is cutting out the blade blanks. So behind me, we have our CNC Waterjet. CNC stands for computer numerically controlled. So what this machine does for us is basically creates a program in our computer which will communicate with the machine in the tower itself, and then it'll cut every single blade to exactly 0.02 of an inch in consistency every single time. The way a Waterjet works, even though it says Waterjet, it's actually water and abrasive mixing. So we use 80 to 120 grit abrasive, which gives us a much finer finish on the profile of the blade. And it mixes in that hopper right there with the water that's pumped through our spigot to our horsepower pump, converts it to 47,000 PSI, and then mixes right down in the mixing tube to cut all the blades out. So if you look on a sheet, we have a sheet right here, we just stopped a program. You can see all this sand on top of the sheet. That's actual abrasive right there, and that's what's actually doing the cutting. The water is just powering it. So you can see that we left a few still in there. They're already cut out, but you can see the consistency between each blade. It's exactly 0.02 of an inch between each blade. All right, guys, we're in the back of the machine here. I'm going to go over each piece of the machine and kind of explain how the process works from the water coming to the spigot, going to the computer, and then powering the tower on the CNC machine. So the first thing that we need is air. So you can see there's an air compressor back there. That air is going to control the tower's movement. So that air is going to go down the line and then up to the tower, and that's actually what's moving the tower on its X, Y, and Z axis. Water is going to be pushed through our chiller unit, which is the gray machine right there. It's going to chill it to exactly 72 degrees before it pushes it through the machine. There's going to be a silver hose that comes right to our horsepower pump right here, and it's going to convert that water to 42,700 PSI. Then it's going to shoot up to the tower, down that silver tube, and then it's going to mix with that abrasive right there, and that's what's going to be doing the cutting. All right, so our final step is coming to our computer here, nesting the specific blade. You can see we've got vandals here and serpents. So when I say nesting, it means placing them close enough to maximize that sheet of steel and then creating the path that Waterjet's going to travel. So all these green lines in here is essentially where that nozzle of the Waterjet is going to travel to cut each blade. It'll start a tab and then cut right around. And it'll do each blade one by one. And that abrasive, that 80 to 120 grit abrasive, is going to cut a little bit slower because we're not using a 36 grit or something lower. It's going to cut slower, but what that'll do is it's going to leave us with a much nicer profile on the back right there than it would if we were cutting with a 36 grit. So that time we're sacrificing for a finer finish. All right, guys, we're gonna let this thing run for you guys so you can see it actually cutting. You can see the consistency, and then we'll pull a knife so you can see the final product. All right, so what Gabe is doing right now is raising the water level just to avoid any backlash from the actual Waterjet itself. So it's gonna cut about 2 inches under the water. Now he's gonna select his spot on the path, and it's gonna start where that last blade left off. Now you can see that little yellow tube right there connected to the abrasive hopper is feeding abrasive into the nozzle where it mixes with that compressed water. So what it's doing is cutting out the handle holes right now where our screws go, and then it'll start the profile of the blade, and then we can lower the water and pull that blast shield up so you can see it actually cutting. This machine actually only requires about as much water as an open faucet and compresses it in that horsepower pump to 42,700 PSI. So we just flipped up that blast shield. Now what Gabe is going to do is lower the water level, and you can see that nozzle cutting at over 42,000 PSI, mixing with that abrasive. It's going to slowly go around like I talked about with that finer media, cutting and finishing each profile of the blade at a high grit finish. Now the reason we use a Waterjet over a plasma cutter or a laser, because we get this question a lot, is because a plasma cutter or a fiber laser actually heats up the edge of the steel that it's cutting, which will ultimately affect the molecular structure in the steel, so when we go to heat treat, you don't get that perfectly hard edge. So this water doesn't get hot at all, keeps the edge perfect, and we're able to machine down to that 2/1000th of an inch on each knife. Now it's cutting all the jimping for the thumb ramp, and it's going to come down to that point. And it's going to cut that final tab so we don't drop it in the tank. And there it is. Cool. So I'll go ahead and pull one so you guys can see the final finish on the edge. You can see very, very little machining marks on the edge. That's the final profile of the blade, handle holes, and then on to the next step.